Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2013 PAS SQLRally Nordic. And I'm Johan, I'm one of the founders of SQLRally Nordic, as well as being president of the Swedish SQL Server user group.
My name is Raul Ilias, and I'm one of the founders of SQLRally Nordic as well.
And I am Tommy. I'm the Microsoft representative of this conference.
And we're really excited to see all of you here. We are in total over 500 people from 20 different countries, which makes us the largest SQLRally conference in the world. So, Tommy, is everything set to go with the agenda?
Yeah, everything is set to go. I met up with all the speakers yesterday, and they are really super excited to get going. And we have a small change on the agenda, though, on the BI track, where we had to switch the sessions with Mark Russo and Albert Ferrari. I have to learn to pronounce that right. So Alberto will deliver his session directly after this keynote at 10:30. Mark Russo will deliver his session at 3:15. Otherwise, everything is set to go.
Thank you, Tommy. I'd like to add also that in addition to the three main tracks, the business intelligence track, the database administration track, and the database development track, we have a couple of really interesting breakout sessions that you will find in the program. And these breakout sessions, they are open to anyone without any pre-registration. And for instance, there will be our keynote speaker, Jim Karkanias. He will be one of the breakout speakers as well. So I can really recommend these breakout sessions also.
And you find all the information about the sessions, the room, and everything in the agenda that you should have in your bag that you got when you registered.
Yeah. So we are looking forward to 2 really great days of the best speakers on the planet. But this event, it's not only about technical things, about learning. Equally important, it's about social things, networking, and having fun. So I'm really assured you don't want to miss the evening party. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Tommy?
Sure, absolutely. The sessions will go on until 5:45 tonight. And then we will have a short break and meet up again out in the airstrip just outside here, 7:15, for a welcome drink. After that, we will go back in these locations and have a great dinner and some magic entertainment. And I have seen those magicians. You should be a little bit careful when you see them, so you don't get lost or anything. And this will go on until 10 o'clock, and then we will continue to networking outside in the airstrip with some music and bar and stuff. I think you will like it a lot.
Thank you, Tommy. So, and you will also find 2 drink tickets in your bags that you can exchange for a beer or a wine or whatever you want. So make sure to have a great fun during the evening. Also, this conference, we have a great lineup of sponsors. So I really encourage you to make use of your breaks to go and speak with the sponsors that will show you remarkable products and services. So I don't know how many of you have visited the website recently. Yes, several have, because we will keep it updated during the event. So maybe you will accidentally see yourself on the website. And I also like to ask you for a favor, and that is to, after each session that you visit, you should go to the website and fill in the evaluation form, because that provides really important feedback to the speakers. And with that, I say welcome to our main keynote speaker, Jim Karkanias. Hey. Give him a hand.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a full crowd. I can't believe the size of this audience. and so attentive relatively early with hangover potential and all of those things with the festivities already starting. So I'm going to talk about what we refer to internally as the data platform. How many people here are involved in big data in some way, shape, or form? So every hand goes up. And yes, the question is, what is big data? It varies based on what you're working on. There are many different facets to it. There's a mystery about it. People tend to use the word without or defining it their own way. So what I'm going to propose is there are a few dimensions to it. Advanced analytics, certainly. The typical V definition, volume, variety, velocity. I've heard visualization now. There are many different aspects to it from that perspective. Certainly streams of data, real-time streams. Big data would not be big data without big data, so large volumes of data, and visualizations, as I implied earlier. So of course, it's a bit of a trick question, what's big data? It's all of these things. And the way we think of it at Microsoft in particular is it's the thing that allows you to proceduralize your business, converting data into information, to convert that into actionable behavior, to drive some particular set of activities. We're thinking about constructing, just as there's an Internet of Things, an Internet of data, an information network that allows you to connect the foundational technologies that you're all used to in the database layer with the analytic technologies in the BI layer without regard for the complexities in between. And that's easier said than done, but we have some things that we want to show you today that indicate we're well on our way to doing that. Clearly the world's changing. I'm sure you're all involved in various consulting activities, enterprise development activities, and everything in between, taking advantage of this trend in processing data in new and creative ways. It used to be, I can remember, I've started programming before that was a real thing to do. It used to be that you would have to worry about memory sizes and data sizes and those kinds of things and try to constrain how you process information. Now it's more effective to try and grab as much data as you can from as many sources as you can, banking on the fact that at some point it will be useful to you. So all data everywhere. I didn't mean to go that far. So if you think about this first block of having data available from all sorts of sources, you can easily think about becoming overwhelmed by that. And machines, through the magic of software, are very good at processing that information and allowing you to extract the value out of it to drive the processes I'm implying. And then, of course, there's a user appetite that's emerging in this space. The current generation, I hate to talk about end users in generational terms, but it's interesting to observe in the era that I grew up in the business process world, I expected that I would have to have the computer do something, and I had to push the computer to do it. The generation that's following me is expecting the computer to do the work and be powered by data and tell them what's happening. And you can build the systems to make that possible, and we want to build a platform to make that possible. Anders Winberg, who's a technical fellow at Microsoft, and I have had a chance to chat about these things throughout the years, and he has some insight that I thought I would share with you about the many problems and solutions in this space, as he likes to refer to it. The first problem is it's hard to make computers faster, and the solution there is, well, use a lot of them. The second problem, therefore, after you solve the first one, is it's hard to deal with a lot of computers that you've put around to deal with the first problem, and so cloud computing becomes the answer to that one. And then given the deluge of data, complex questions and complex answers interlock, and machine learning becomes the answer to that one. So you can see there's a pattern of interrelated things that offer the solutions to the problem set that we're all faced with in this big data cascade. And then all of this is always on, running all the time. So 24/7 billion machines and devices creates the Internet of Things, and that strategy as a mechanism to interact with your data is an interesting concept to keep in mind. So I ask you to think about these 4 pillars as milestones or goalposts in this giant big data stadium that we're playing in. So how do we manage this complexity? We're proposing a new paradigm that recognizes a couple of things along a continuum of complexity. At one end, there's the few things side of complexity. And I think we know how to deal with stuff like that. Construction, manufacturing techniques for individual small objects, relatively straightforward to do, lots of processes to handle that. At the other extreme, you might predict, are the trillion side of things. And this is things like plastics and the industry around that, dealing with electrons in electricity and all of the highly distributed environments that are necessary to make the flow of electricity work. It turns out those two ends are relatively manageable. It's the middle part where things like economics, politics, medicine, psychology, biochemistry, those kinds of things are in the middle, and it's only trillions of things, but their interaction space is very large. And big data, it seems to me, operates right in that space. So we're proposing through this information network and a data platform that makes this network possible to push the boundaries of what's realistic in these systems and create a framework that you can leverage that makes it easier to deal with these various dimensions of complexity. So SQL 14 has lots of things. Folks have been keeping track of that. How many people have tracked PASS and what's gone on there? About a third of the audience. It's not that early in the morning still. So maybe it's an obvious question that folks would be tracking SQL 14, but it's important to sort of recognize these various dimensions of the boundaries that we're creating, extending to create innovation. And our investments show up along those areas: in-memory technologies, online database operations, always on, resource management, and so on. And all of that also present in the parallel data warehouse, which I would encourage you to learn more about in a session later in this conference. But think about having a modular, scalable system that leverages Microsoft technology in turnkey form, Hyper-V and other resource managing things. So that's all just to set the stage for what we want to talk about in this platform. And I'll draw your attention to the discover side of the equation. Imagine you have an ocean of information being generated by devices, vehicles, sensors in your manufacturing line, and so on, the whole Internet of Things concept, et cetera. What's the data model for that? How do you find the data for that? So the first thing that we're doing is creating the discovery mechanism to be able to pull that data to your desktop and allow you to find the things that are relevant to you. Eventually that'll find you as opposed to you looking for it, but initially we're making it easier for you to find that and visualize it. Leveraging the power of the network, a people network in this case, and collaborating across various business functions, we want to create a social network of collaboration so that the things you find, the tools that you use, can easily create objects that you share through this system. So whether it's a data set or an application that you find or even a model that you generate. Once you've done that, operationalizing it so that it can run at scale is a natural next step. So being able to take some thing that you've analyzed or some model that you're going to generate and moving it up into the cloud to run at scale is a natural next step, and we want to streamline that. And then, of course, no ecosystem really works without having some sort of management, even if that management is self-directed. So you want to be able to operationalize the management of that through stewardship functions, data stewards, or IT pro roles, enterprise folks managing resources, and so on. And I tend to break these up into three big categories of analyzing the information. You're finding it and visualizing it and refining it. Scaling it, whether it's across people because you're collaborating, or it's across your enterprise infrastructure because you're operationalizing it, and then some stewardship function of that data, managing it through either departmental level data stewards or enterprise level IT pros. So now let's, again, layering up concepts of things to discuss. Given that, the possible things that you can do with big data vary by industry, and I'll give you a few examples, and then I'm standing between you and some demos, and I'll try to get to that as quickly as I can. So in the lower middle to on size and complexity, you have a typical footprint of ERP, CRM style data. Everyone's very familiar with that. Increasing along both dimensions above that is the Web 2.0 scale, finer grained, higher volume, more complex data. And then still higher is the big data space that we all usually talk about, that's dimensionalized, as I implied in my opening remarks. There's an interesting concept to think about this expanding footprint when applied to industry. So the next slide shows big data in health. And it's a busy slide, and I think we're sharing these slides as part of the conference, but I'll draw your attention to just look at the dimension along the diagonal moving up on both axes. You start at the lower end of business value and impact and technical complexity and just trying to figure out what happened. And in this context, it's health, and it's more reactive. Most of health is reactive. Presented with a condition, the physician tries to figure out what went on. More advanced groups move from what happened to what's happening. It's a monitoring environment. And you move along this progression, I'll say, of sophistication to prediction, and prediction that can become preventative. And I think you can all draw analogies to that, to your relevant industries or whatever segments you each operate in. And we span quite a few industries, and as we build out this data platform, we'll talk about that more later. Of course, you don't need to limit this to this domain. The next slide shows maybe applying these kinds of tools that allow you to analyze, discover, share, collaborate, manage on your own email, for example. Here's an email, a bit sanitized to protect the folks involved who took out last names. But you'll see we're doing something called a bug bash. And that sounds obvious. Internally, when we go through a new build, we try to stress it in as many different ways as possible to reveal the bugs. And what's really interesting about this is, so Lance analyzed Julie's mail to him and came up with a dialogue about this. I'll take a moment to pause and observe that Julie is Lance's wife, so he's also very courageous to be analyzing her email to him. Our tools can produce a visualization, so there's all these words about her email pattern, but there's an interesting graph that the system could produce that immediately shows what's happening, or a heat map, and you can draw your own conclusions. It's sort of a comical exercise, but it shows the power of being able to easily, in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, fully analyze the email activity point to point. But you could do it group by group or keyword by keyword. In fact, a few weeks earlier, Lance did this with email to me, so email between me and Lance, and I'll draw your attention to a few things. You could read for yourself here more slowly, but there's an interesting phenomenon with large amounts of data that are easily analyzed. The two highlighted sentences, he observed that I usually send him mail between 11 and 12 at night on Wednesdays, and comically, that's exactly when I replied to this email. To the 16th is a Wednesday. So that's, to me, very poignant evidence of the predictive power of large amounts of data. There's no model in there, it's just the statistics pointed when you could look effectively at that large amount of data, you could find that sort of information. So I'll switch now to talking about the platform itself and the functions, not necessarily products, but the functions that such a platform that produces this information network that drives this kind of activity could create. So at the center of it is data. Clearly, Office as a very powerful channel for delivering and generating and receiving information is a good venue for us. So we have the Power X suite of products, Power Pivot, Power View, Power Map, Power Query recently announced, and so on, as what we call endpoints in this system that sort of close the last mile between the information network and the user. Later today, I'll be talking about machine learning and democratizing that. That's the title of the talk, I believe, is what we settled on. And in the same way that we want Excel to make it easy for anyone to analyze any kind of data, we want some tool to make it easy for anyone to use any kind of machine learning. Typically, the domain of the PhD, we want to move it to the domain of everyone. And the Office channel is a natural vehicle for that kind of reach. I talked about data discovery as a major element in the platform. We want to find new techniques. Excel is certainly an interesting one. It's something like 100% of the people who are involved in data in some way use Excel in some step or another, so that's an important observation. We're very happy about that, obviously. And we're looking for feedback from all of you as to what other sorts of discovery vehicles might work for that. Finding data, generating data, the models that, let's say, Lance built for email analysis, it'd be interesting to share that. Remember the collaboration part of the data platform. So we want to build this notion of a marketplace for these things, where you could find pieces of data, raw data, or processed data, or something everything in between. There are a few companies on the planet that have that enterprise scale. There are other companies that have data scale. There are a very small number of companies that are the intersection of those things. We're one of them. And the Bing corpus represents a very large data source. If you accept all of the points I have been making so far about it being all about data, then finding a way to access all of the data or make it available in some safe way is an interesting proposition. So the Bing corpus already powers certain things as listed here. Translation APIs and other things are available, synonym finders, those kinds of things. But imagine what could happen next as we expand that capability. And again, we'd love to hear from you as to what kinds of things you might think are interesting there. There's Azure and the BI services on top of it. I implied about the machine learning and democratizing that. That's part of this platform. We'll talk at length later. Management, last but not least, management. There are a few more click-throughs here, but I want to pause on management to talk about this notion of building this network requires management capabilities, either built into the technology itself so that it self-manages, or providing hooks for various roles to provide that management, IT pro or data steward, as I talked about earlier. HD Insight is in general availability now. Hopefully folks have seen that. If you haven't played with it yet, I strongly encourage it. MapReduce is a very important technique for dealing with your data sets and dimensionalizing it to drive other processes. It's one of many techniques. Being able to use HD Insight in a Windows Server class, Azure class way with fault tolerance and authentication and so on makes a good thing even better. And I believe we're one of, I think we contributed 6,000 lines of code to the open, so we're a contributor in that space. We already have a Microsoft contributor on the books. Is that correct? I think that's right, yeah. Okay, so lots of pieces, lots of moving parts to an ecosystem built around data. The data platform is what we're calling the foundational technology. It's to construct an information network, all in support of an ecosystem of activities around the spaces I just talked about. So with that, let me introduce Judy Meyer, who's leading the ecosystem group, and she'll take us through some of these tools that I've implied, and we'll get to see them in action.
Thank you, Jim. All right, so like Jim mentioned, I own the customer and partner ecosystem around information networks, the whole big picture that Jim just walked us all through. And as part of this, my team is responsible for creating all the data partnerships to go bring in the world's data, all sorts of public data sources into the system, into what we call the data catalog, and making sure that you guys are able to use Excel, our handy-dandy data manipulation tool, to be able to mash up data sources that are coming either from your corporate sources with publicly available sources that are out there in the world to really curate and gain some insights into your data. So the first part of this, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time showcasing some of the Power Suite of tools that comes built in with Power BI. The first thing that I'm going to start with here is Power Query. So let me see if I can show off some zooming capabilities here. And start with a bunch of these connectors that you can see up here on the left-hand corner. I'll do a quick demo which includes an online search, and this is where you'll notice it connects back into our data catalog to bring in all of these indexed data sources from within your corporation, enterprise data sources, data sets and curated, mashed up data sets that your colleagues or your team might have created for you as a query that they've shared with you, as well as world's data. So we've collaborated with Bing and Windows Azure Marketplace to catalog a bunch of data sets in here. And we have, I think, over 3 million data sets right now, and it's growing every day. So if there are data sets that you guys find is very critical for you folks to do business, please come contact me after this speech. I'd be more than happy to take those requests back to the team. You can connect to data sets from the web. So if there's this table that you've always gone to through Bing search, you can put in the URL here. There's a bunch of different file sources that you can connect to as well: Excel, CSV, XML, a bunch of different database sources, obviously SQL Server, and of course if you have Oracle, IBM DB2. As well as other sources. So here you notice Marketplace is one of the options. And this is where I'm going to go into Windows Azure HD Insights. And this is one of the bubbles that Jim had talked about. Let me connect into my corporate source. So for this demo, what I'm going to do is my team has been doing business, our organization has been doing business with a bunch of our customers and people that I really want to start assessing how have the stocks done over a period of time. I have 50 years worth of data here that I want to analyze. And really pull in how have different sectors done in this. As we think about building an ecosystem around it, what are some of the industry verticals that we want to focus on, and walk through that arc, analyzing that against S&P 500 company data and just observing the trends in there. So now I've connected to my corporate source. And in this case, since it is my corporate source, I would know exactly which file I'm looking for. And I go in and launch that file source from HD Insights. And I noticed that it pulls it back here as a comma-separated, a single column. And within Power Query, it's just really powerful because I can just right-click there, and within a couple mouse button clicks, go in to split the column. Let me zoom out. And it automatically recognizes there's probably using comma as a delimiter, and very quickly gives me the spread of that singular column split out into multiple columns. So this looks like great, very good. Now I'm almost in a position where I can start assessing and analyzing this data. But before I do that, I want to kind of clean up the source a little bit. So let me add titles to my columns. Rename this through. I know this is the stocks data that we keep just to track min and max, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove those columns. Let me rename, and I really only want the closing price for each of my stocks. And I know this is the dividend associated with those stocks. And you'll notice on the right-hand side here within Power Query, as I'm shaping and filtering these things, it really keeps track of each of the steps that I've gone through to arrive at the final curated set of data. So I have the flexibility to go back at any point in time, and then come back down, and you'll notice a little X mark on the left-hand side, so I can delete any of the steps. And one of the observations that I make immediately is it's been smart enough to realize that the first column is text, the next two columns are numbers, and I would have thought, you know, the last one should have been recognized as a number too. I wonder why it didn't do that. So I just scan just visually down through this, and I notice, hey, there's a bunch of null values here. So let me go ahead and quickly replace those values so that I can deal with numbers and visualize that better. So once I replace that, I can quickly go in and change the format to numbers. Again, I scan through this, and you'll notice the rows are getting updated as I scroll through this. So not all data sets, rows, get loaded in here, but I can manipulate it as I go. Right now, visual scan, everything looks good, so I want to click on the Done button there, and it immediately launches that data set, which is nicely shaped in a format that I want to be able to analyze into my spreadsheet. So next, what I want to do, like I mentioned, I want to go into this online search and do a quick query to bring in all the S&P 500 data sets, because again, I just want to analyze all of these organizations that my team has been touching against how the different sectors within S&P 500 is operating. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, I have the ability to drop down, and I could do this search if this is purely within my organization search. I really don't care about any of that public data coming out from the web. Then I can limit the search within my organization, or let's say I've already created a query in the past, a mashed up data set, and that's all I want to see, then I can limit this to just all the shared queries that I have in the catalog. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and leave this default as all. And you'll notice in this case, it pulled a whole bunch of data sets from Wikipedia. You see the W symbol there marking that. And when I mouse over these data sets, it gives me a quick rollout window that gives me a snapshot of what these data sets look like. So I quickly scan through the fields that are coming out of this S&P 500 component stock. It looks like it's a complete list of all the S&P 500 companies. The key things that I'm really looking for is the name of the company, which sector it belongs to, so I can match that with the enterprise data set that I've already launched. And well, you know, I also noticed that there's an address field, so I think, well, great, I'm going to launch this so that way I could show off the Power Map capabilities if I want to plot that address in a 3D map. And you'll notice all of that data set gets loaded here. So now I have two of these sheets, and within Power Query, I have a very quick ability here, a single mouse button click, where I click on Merge to merge the first data set that I pulled in from HD Insights with the second data set that I pulled in from Wikipedia. And I really want to only analyze whatever companies are listed within this S&P 500. So I click OK. And that right there goes ahead and builds that query automatically behind the scene using our magic sauce and pulls in this mashed up query for you right away. So there's really not too much of the SQL, the query pieces that you really need to know. So any information worker within your organizations now have this power in their fingertips. So so this is a merged table where on the right-hand side I have the ability to pick and choose what are the data sets and columns that I want to bring in and land in here. And like I mentioned, I want the company name, the sector it belongs to, as well as the headquarters. Again, let me do a quick scan over. Things look good. I'm happy with it, so let me go ahead and hit done. So as you can notice, the power of bringing in all of these multiple data sets from different sources, mashing it up, curating it, cleaning it up, has been very, very simple, right? It's taken me, 3 minutes here to do this whole thing. Now let me move into the Power Map capabilities to see, okay, what does Power Map offer? So it's really a 3-dimensional mapping capability, and it's a really, really smart service because you'll notice it just takes a little bit of time here to launch the service itself, but you'll notice it automatically recognizes that I'm dealing with geographic data. So if I had latitude, longitude type data sets in here, it would, again, Power Map, when it launches it, automatically recognizes and plots it for me. In this case, it realizes that, hey, there's this field called address, and I am still able to gain some location-specific data from that column. So it asks me, all right, well, I found this address data set. Should I go ahead and plot that? So in this case, you'll notice it did, and I'll say, yes, it looks good. It's already given me a first version of, here's all the stocks, and here's kind of where each of those trading companies are headquartered at. Now I can go in and very quickly say, I want to see in this column chart, I want you to analyze and give me all the dividends associated with this thing. And on top of that, I want this to be analyzed by sector. So I drag and drop all of these things, again, very easily doable. And I have the ability in here within Power Map to switch the themes. I always like a black background with lighted dots on there. So, and these are all, again, let me close this so the map gets a little bigger. And right now I'm doing a touch screen, right? So if I just pan in on here on my laptop, very quickly having the ability to visualize these things. You'll also notice on the right-hand side, I have the ability to go in and switch the type of this plot. Again, single drop-down list. If I want this to show me a heat map, I can very quickly see that majority of those traded in S&P 500 are obviously headquartered within the East Coast at New York, and then I see another big bubble here on the Chicago area, and a little bit of bubbles here on the West Coast. So as you can see, a very quick and nice and easy 3D visualization ability, just moving around the globe and enabling you to few mouse button clicks, be able to really visualize your data through maps.
Judy, what's that offshore account there?
Well, there is Bermuda. So if you mouse over that, let me go back into some other color that shows it a little better. There we go. There it is, Bermuda.
So there's some stock activity in an offshore account in Bermuda.
There is a company in Bermuda, that's right. All right, so let me close out of Power Map and go into what if I want to do more charts and additional visualizations. And as many of you are familiar, we have a tool called Power View that I can launch for those purposes. And Power View really gives me the ability, yes, I can map those in 3-dimensional maps with Geo. Now I have the ability to do charts, charting for data, and really talk through timescales if I want to see the evolution of data and how the performance of different things have happened over a period of time. So let me kind of clear this off so I can build it from scratch here. So I know I want to analyze over time. So let me pick year, and I want to see how the stock growth is doing. And it automatically just launches it as the data set in there. I don't really want a cumulative. I want to see a line chart. And let me pull this year into the axis. There it is. And once again, very, very quickly, this has been able to give me all the selections that I have from my merged query, pick all the fields that I want to analyze, and again, I want to bring in sector as a legend. so that I could really very quickly see, okay, well, let me try zooming in here. How are the different sectors doing? I noticed right away, okay, in the last 50 years, something peaked out there. Oh, it's the financial sector that peaked about the 1984-85 timeline. I can very quickly just double click on that. Everything pops back out and gets active. See the lowest sector of performance, which happens to be energy. And very quickly visualize and gain some insights into this data through this. Let me switch into another worksheet here that I've pre-populated and expand out this cool bubble chart. So you'll notice on here I've added another dimension. So in this bubble chart I also want to see, okay, well, over a period of time I see all of these stock growths, but I also want to see how dividends have been doing within each of these stock growths over a period of time. So if I play this out, you'll notice all of these bubbles just showing me a complete time trajectory of, oh, well, it looks like early on, for the most part, most sectors have been doing the same. And then all of a sudden, I see this little green bubble that just grows and grows and grows and keeps getting really big. And I go, oh, man, I want to see what that is. So let me see if I can click on that. And it is the financial sector. So the financial sector that peaked back in the 84-85 time frame. And you can, when I click on it, you'll notice it gives me a complete trajectory to really go back and look at and analyze this data set very, very quickly. So
Green for money, I suppose.
Green for money.
So I think you're seeing that the abstract things I talked about in the top of the discussion, discovering your data, mashing it together, analyzing it, refining it. You know, we're all very technical here, but you didn't need to be to achieve all of that. That's sort of the key. Publish this set, have an ecosystem of other people extending it and using it to drive insights. In fact, maybe this is a good chance to talk about the segments that you lead, Judy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as part of building the data ecosystem and the solution ecosystem, we are focusing on 5 industry verticals to make sure that all the necessary data sets and the appropriate solutions can be built to enable those sectors first. And obviously, we'll be panning out and growing the ecosystem as we go. So the first 5 that we are focusing on includes media, retail, healthcare, financial services, and manufacturing. And I want to take a quick segue into showcasing one of our key partner and a key customer lighthouse win here, because you noticed through my demo, I was kind of able to, in the 5 to 7 minutes that I had here, very quickly walk through a showcase of how do I gain some insights into this data. But it was a very eye-opening experience for myself as well as our whole team when we started working with people who are doing the real job out there and utilizing Power BI to do their day-to-day job. So I wanted to showcase Mediacom, who is one of the largest media buying corporations across the world, part of WPP organization. And really what they've done through this exercise, doing a proof of concept with us for Power BI, was pick up Power BI and translate it into the world of media and how they've been able to create insights for their customers. So in this case, the scenario that they were going after was they have customers, so in this case they have this dashboard that they've built for Shell, and Shell typically would come in and say, hey Mediacom, I want you guys to run a campaign for me, and here's $5 million that I want to spend in this campaign. And on the right hand side here, you'll notice it's a screenshot. Obviously I don't have the Mediacom server here hooked up, but this is a screenshot of a Power View dashboard within Power BI that Mediacom created for Shell to track, okay, how did my money get invested and how did I realize the value of spending this $5 million within this campaign for media that you put together. And they came out with these 5 metrics that they were going to look at to really see, okay, well, you spent this much, this was your budget, so if you spend about $5 million, you expect to reap at least $5 million worth of revenue. And I'm not really going to bore you guys with each of the details in here. I'm sure those of you guys who work in the media sector probably probably understand this a little bit better. It's basically paid media. How much did me as Shell spend in paid media? And this is just an aggregate score showing on a scale of 1 to 5, how did you reap your benefits for these things? And I just want to highlight on the left-hand side here, the CIO of Mediacom, Lowell Simpson. One of the biggest thing that he got super excited about when his team of IWs, information workers, created this dashboard for him through Power BI was, oh my goodness, I have all these data sets, and typically when I have to go off and tell Shell that I'm glad you guys spent $5 million with me, and here's how I put it to use, they have to go into Nielsen, they got to go into Comscore, they have to go into Kantar, all of these desperate data sources that needs to all get pulled in, and he was just amazed by the fact that ultimately, his team was just able to create this one single dashboard, and let me do a quick mouse button click here. So if you'd clicked on one of those boxes for paid media, it takes you very quickly into a drill down to show Shell, all right, well, on the right-hand side, there's all the summary reports. Overall score on a scale of 1 to 5 is 4.3, and you actually spent, Shell, you spent $21 million with Mediacom to come up with, maybe a bunch of magazine ads, a bunch of cable TV ads, local TV ads to create a video, so on and so forth, and kind of assessing that you reaped the benefit, which was about $800K more than what you spent, which obviously from Shell's point of view is, oh, that's great news, that's very good. And you'd always hope that it's a green value, which is higher than the delta net negative. So that, I think, Jim, helped summarize some of the kinds of cool things that we're starting to observe. Customers within each of the ecosystem verticals start utilizing Power BI to really gain some insights.
Thanks very much, Judy. So hopefully you're seeing that as I said earlier, the abstract things I discussed at the beginning of building this information network and having these moving parts sort of come together, self-managed in a way, reducing the friction for the end user, whether that end user be very sophisticated or an information worker or something in between, is becoming real. Many of the components we've talked about have been around for a while, have been updated recently or about to be released in new forms. HD Insight has GA'd recently, as I mentioned. The Power BI stack is in preview. You can get involved in several ways as we extend these boundaries and building on the foundational strength of what's in SQL 14 and PDW and their adjacencies. So, as we climb this mountain of data, I'd ask you to think about what will you do individually. There are many, many more things to discuss. We kind of took you through a rapid tour in just almost an hour or so, and we're only scratching the surface. So the best way to really understand this is to get involved, get engaged. I know you're committing to that even through your attendance at this conference. And I'll just call out a few key things to focus on. The 2014 is imminent. The upgrading your installations or your customers' installations, trying Power BI and HD Insight to start to figure out how these things integrate and how you might extend them in your own environment, and of course leverage the cloud in the background. And with that, let me thank you for your attention and encourage you to enjoy the rest of your conference.